Hello everyone and welcome back to the Great Book of Grudges. My name is Nathan and we're back with another Total War Warhammer video. So today we're going to finally talk about the Snakemen of Khuresh and the Hinterlands of Khuresh. I've been avoiding this topic for a while, but that's mainly because I've been trying to get my hands on some older lore books. But before we begin, we do have a sponsored segment for this video. This video is sponsored by Dragon Champions. Dragon Champions is a thematic mobile game which features its own lengthy campaign with a number of different acts. Its battle system is turn-based, reminiscent of old-school Final Fantasy. You attack using special abilities and they'll attack you back. There is an auto-battle feature, yes, but it'll only get you so far, as you do need to start strategizing with your different hero loadouts. The campaign itself has its own storyline which will keep you immersed, and its art style is quite stylistic for a mobile game where everything actually looks pretty good. Not only that, but as you progress through your campaign, you'll also be unlocking new heroes. The art style is clearly inspired by stuff like World of Warcraft, which is familiar to a lot of players such as myself. The developers had reached out to me with a special promo code. The code will give you a bunch of in-game resources to boost up your characters, and not only that, but you'll also get access to a character known as VIKRAM, an orc shaman looking type character which I was given the choice out of a pool to pick, and this character has got the art style that I just like the most. A big thank you to the developers App Quantum for reaching out. You can find the link to the game and the special promo code in the description below. My special in-game code is TGBOG Gift, which will give you a bunch of different goodies and a nice head start at the game. But with all that being said, let's just jump back into the video. Thanks again to Dragon Champions, as the sponsorship money is going directly back into the channel for some much needed upgrades. Recent PC issues have been keeping me away from streaming, and I just want to clear those out as soon as possible. As you guys know, I prefer coming into these videos with as much lore as possible instead of going into the Wikipedia sources, as those are created by fans and thus could not have official lore, which can cause some issues, of course. But with all that being said, some fan art will feature on screen from the Brood of the Naga Queens fan project. But let's not waste any more time and jump right in. The question for this video is, will we see the Hinterlands of Khuresh and the Snakemen of Khuresh in Total War Warhammer 3? First, we're going to have to look at things geographically. The Hinterlands of Khuresh itself had been moved around geographically during earlier editions. Only in the final editions, I believe around 7th, was its place in the southeastern parts of the Warhammer Fantasy world finally confirmed. This is right below Grand Cafe, so it could be seen. Considering the fact that most of these areas are very much expected in Warhammer 3, it would be strange if it wasn't added in. Not only because it's below Grand Cafe, but it presents a lot of opportunity. This is a territory which is very much uninhabited. Yes, there are some locals, and we will get to them in due time, but I'm referring to this in aspect for cross-game DLC for Game 1 and Game 2 to be included in the Game 3 map. I'm obviously referring to the standard campaign map, that of the thematic map, which is always available at launch, instead of referring to the Immortal Empires, as of course that one would already have Cafe and the Empire, Lustria and all that, or at least I'm very much hoping so. So the Hinterlands of Khuresh themselves could act as a point where different races can be introduced by. We know that high elf colonies existed there a long time ago, and they've been abandoned ever since. However, who's to say that the high elves, the dark elves, the Empire, or any other races can't land there as a potential vantage point for a DLC plot? It doesn't really make too much sense to introduce the other races inside of Cafe, barring perhaps a basic consulate. Of course, Ind is also there too on the world map, so the possibilities are pretty endless. Though I do have a feeling that we might see Ind in the future should the demand be high enough and Games Workshop see the possible profit to be made from that. So what can we expect from the lands of Khuresh? Well, jungles and wastes. This area in the world map is known to be extremely dangerous. It's going to be kinda like Lustria in a sense, though with the obvious influence from Southeastern Asian territories, as of course the Warhammer Fantasy map is based on our own real world. It's expected we will see a lot of mountainous terrain, which might make it difficult for a lot of races to travel through. Think about it, very similar to the area known as the Spine of Sotek. There's a lot of twists and turns, but it's a lot of mountainous regions. I'm using Lustria as the example here, as we know of the dense jungle forests and so on, so it's better to use Lustria as a point of reference here, of course. If we get the whole of the hinterlands, which I am hoping so, then we will also have a bunch of areas which will act as coastal regions too. Those, I guess, could be considered the safest areas, as they wouldn't be surrounded too much by trees, and thus would be the best areas for high elves, humans, Bretonnians, or whatever. But we've spoken enough about the hinterlands themselves, let's start looking towards the denizens. There are no human nations attached to this area. As far as we are aware in the lore, humans do exist, but they are more like food than anything else. The lore goes on to state that there are a high concentration of snakemen, which we'll discuss in a little bit, but the main reason why I'm mentioning this is that it may or may not be referring to them directly. There are beastmen all over the Warhammer Fantasy universe, and it's expected that they'll be there too. The highest concentrations are around the Old World and anything that's landlocked to it. So now we look towards the most dominant species within the Hinterlands of Khuresh. These are often referred to as the Snakemen of Khuresh and the Blood Naga of Khuresh. Whether or not they are from the same race is completely unknown. There is very little official art, which you can see on screen right now, and there have only been one set of miniatures ever released. This was way back in 3rd edition before I was even born. It's interesting to note here that these former miniatures classified the Snakemen as Chaos Snakemen. I'm not too sure if this is again referring to the Snakemen of Khuresh, as the lore itself is... well, back then, the lore always had issues. It still has it now, but back then, just a lot of stuff was introduced and then never fleshed out. With the Blood Naga being the perfect example, we are told that they are more or less the rulers of Khuresh itself, likely also ruling over the other Snakemen, but there was never an official artwork for them or any official miniatures. All we have to go by is very minimal scraps of lore, which honestly don't tell us much whatsoever. The only thing that is established in a concrete basis for the Blood Naga is that they have an insatiable thirst for blood, which is said to be much more dominant than even some of the strongest vampiric bloodlines. If I can base it on pure assumption, as obviously this is a speculation video, there is a form of hierarchy where the Snakemen would serve the Blood Naga. This is the only thing that really makes the most sense given the small amounts of lore that we have. Now, this isn't like Cafe, which has always had a massive demand by the player base. That and Cafe was always fleshed out here and there through multiple editions, also through stuff like the RPG series which fleshed out Cafe even further. So with that, I don't think that we'll see the Snakemen of Khuresh being added in as their own race or faction. If we didn't see that for the Famir, another Chaos-associated race, then we will not see it for the Snakemen. But that's not to say that we might not see the Snakemen anyway. Barring the fact, of course, that modders will likely try and create them, it's very possible we might see Snakemen being introduced for Chaos. If, of course, they're going with the older lore, then the Snakemen are associated with Chaos, and that could provide some DLC units. Maybe not just for Chaos itself, as we know we're getting monogod factions which has a healthy mix of warriors and demons, but what about for Norska? There has been some questions from the fans if Norska might just be renamed when it comes to Warhammer 3, renaming its Tribes of the North or something like that, which would make sense and would have the possible inclusion of Kurgans, Hung, and other different races and factions. This could also greatly benefit the Snakemen of Khuresh and see them implemented. We know we have Snakemen and we know we have Blood Naga. That's a possible Lord and Hero choice and some possible units too. Again, taking influence on the implementation of the Famir for the Norskans in general. This could be a way to introduce some other stuff to Norska or Tribes of the North if they end up getting called that, and not make them just a reskin faction of the Warriors of Chaos or Chaos in general. It would provide some faction identity, which is desperately needed, but also introduces minor races and factions which we might not even see. I think this would probably be the best way to see them introduced, and that way everyone would be happy, I guess. I know a lot of people want to see them as their own race and faction, but I don't know, it just seems like it would be a tad too much. Maybe some races just aren't fit for a race pack. I know that's not going to be pleasing to hear for some of you, but if the Famir didn't get it, I guess you can understand my reasoning about this. Also, keep in mind, I could be entirely wrong. We don't know what Creative Assembly are planning, and well, yeah, I initially thought that Cathay would have been introduced into Warhammer 3, but as a DLC faction, not as a base game race. It could be very possible, if the interest is there, that, yeah, they'll be introduced as a race, though I do think the whole merging them into a Tribes of the North idea kinda works better. It's just my opinion. I know a lot of people are looking forward to them, but given the fact that we have gone through Game 1 and Game 2 with a lot of possible races that ended up not getting introduced, I don't know, I just don't feel a lot of hope for a minor race which may or may not appear. I don't know, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Of course, this is just a speculation video, and we can have a bit of a discussion and see what you guys think.